Bittensor is crypto's original laboratory. My name is Jeremy, aka School Crypto, and I'm bringing you another Bittensor video. So, this is a tweet that I had the other day, and I really thought there was a very interesting corollary between Bittensor, the ecosystem, and actual real-world laboratories. And it all starts with the subnet owner being the owner of the laboratory and setting strict rules about how they want their incentive mechanisms actually solved for. So you need to have certain parameters, and you have to have a well-defined incentive mechanism in order to be able to solve for certain digital commodities. And like a laboratory, you need to have strict rules in terms of what's allowed, what's not allowed, what you're solving for, and what the scientists can actually work on. So that is very interesting in the sense that those are two very similar approaches that are going on, one in a crypto ecosystem like Bittensor and one in an actual real life laboratory. And also, you have in a laboratory, you have real experimentation going on. You have lab results that are coming from scientists that are using their creativity, they're using their experimentation, they have hypotheses that they're testing out in order to solve for whatever is being worked on within that particular laboratory. And it's the same thing for miners, right? They're using their creativity, they're using their models, they're using their hypotheses in order to solve for these digital commodities, whether it's solving for a machine learning model, whether it's trying to provide more compute to a certain subnet or inference, or if you're actually, solving for a marketing subnet like Bitcast for creating the best content. That's really aligning with that incentive mechanism. All these miners are doing is testing out their hypotheses, looking into their models, their formulas, and then if that works, they get incentivized for it with subnet tokens. And it goes along the same lines of there's a certain scientist within a laboratory, if their work gets, approved, they get more funding for whatever they're working on, and then they get more compensated for the work that they've done. And if they don't do good work, then they're going to kind of be pushed aside, and the scientists that are working on the things that are actually, being approved and then being, funded, they get compensated for that. So that is something that is very interesting in terms of the dynamic between the two and how similar it is. And you have the validators, right? The validators are checking the work, and they're making sure that every miner that submits work is aligned with the incentive mechanism that the subnet owner is trying to accomplish, right? It's the same thing for a laboratory, right? There's certain strict rules and regulations and associations that need to make sure that the laboratory is doing work that's legal, that is abiding by certain rules and regulations, and they're pretty much validating their work, so those are all aspects of how Bittensor is a very much correlated with actual real life laboratories. And you have pure experimentation, creativity that's being done every single day, every single week, every single month. And then you have these subnet owners that are pretty much the owners of these laboratories that are setting these strict rules and parameters in order to best get the results from the miners. And Kantz was on a podcast with Bitcoin.com and mentioning that Bittensor is like the Bitcoin of productive work, of machine learning, of AI, in a sense that with Bitcoin you have people that have these ant miners that are solving certain hashes, and then they get rewarded with Bitcoin. And you have miners that have certain skill sets in order to solve certain incentive mechanisms for all sorts of problems and initiatives, and then they get rewarded with a subnet token. So this is crypto's open laboratory, right? Like, can you guys think of any other crypto project that has this type of experimentation that goes on, that has these certain parameters that are like very narrow, very strict, yet gives the miners some autonomy to utilize their creativity in order to make discoveries, just like a laboratory, right? Just like a physical laboratory where scientists are working on certain problems that they're trying to solve and get discoveries and then to get funded for. So I just look at a lot of other crypto ecosystems, and it's like DeFi, it's NFTs, it's real world assets. They're kind of just like building businesses, on their own with their own team, with their own coders and developers. And it's not really like an open system where people can participate. Like you have DeFi that, me, you, anybody can provide liquidity in a liquidity pool, and then you can get trading fees from it. So like that's a way where people are like, participating, like in a decentralized sense, right? Or if you're staking on a network, you're providing the stake to validate that network to make sure that it's robust and safe and secure, right? But in terms of actually contributing to the protocol and making, the subnet like a stronger, foundation and giving it more value, I don't really see any other projects built on other platforms that have this particular dynamic where it gives you a platform to solve for a very narrowly focused problem, to produce a digital commodity and then get rewarded for it. Like I can't think of anything like that, right? So, for me, Bittensor really is the real life open only laboratory in crypto, that anybody can come to the lab and experiment and follow the rules and get incentivized to create discoveries, right? To be able to come up with innovations and do it in a sense where it's decentralized, it's permissionless, but you still need to follow the rules, right? Like, for me, I had some entries as a miner, and sometimes I didn't like follow the parameters, and I wasn't able to submit my entry, right? Because it didn't follow the parameters. And it's the same thing for a scientist coming into a lab and then showing the people the results, and they can say, hey, this didn't follow the parameters, so this is not valid. This is not a valid entry, right? So it's such an interesting dynamic in terms of how, experimentation and creativity is such a big part of it, but it has to be very narrowly focused, and there has to be like rules and parameters in order to create, those innovations and those discoveries. So what do you guys think? Do you think that Bittensor is truly crypto's open laboratory, or do you look at it a little differently? Definitely let me know down in the comments below. Appreciate your time as always. Give me a like if you got anything out of this video. I look forward to talking to you guys soon. Take care.